I made this, and I made these too, and I'll show you how to make one for yourself. It's pretty easy and very rewarding. It's a great way to use up old paper and make a beautiful journal that you aren't intimidated to mess up since you made it. And if you're like me, it will probably have some imperfections in it anyways, so what's there to ruin? So go find all your old sketchbooks and get started folding the extra or ruined papers in half. One way to make sure that the edges stay exact is to line the corners up and start the crease in the center of the fold and pull up and down with your paper folder. You want to go up and down it a few times to give it a good crease. And it does help to use a page folder. You might be able to use a few other items, but I did get this one especially for journal making. Once you have all the pages folded up, you need to split them up evenly into little groups and tuck them inside each other. I have 5 groups of 5 pages tucked inside each other like little tacos. These are actually called signatures. I have a group of 5 signatures with 5 pages in them. Next, you'll need a ruler, a pencil, and an awl or some other tool to help make holes. You're going to be making marks for the holes for where you're going to be sewing. So you need to make sure you have an even number. I chose to do 8 holes. You could do less or more. I chose to go on the more side because I use a lot of different mediums and I need this to stay intact. So for this one, I did 3 holes at the top and 3 holes at the bottom that are about 1 inch apart from each other. And then I did 2 holes in the middle that are 1 inch apart from each other, but 2 inches apart from the other holes. I hope that makes sense. And I made some marks on the ruler where it would go so that I could do the rest of the signatures easier. That everything is marked up. You're going to take it one signature at a time and paper clip them together and take your awl or whatever tool you're using to poke holes. You're going to poke holes right at the crease where you made that mark. And you are going to repeat this process with all of the signatures that you have. And once you are done poking all of the holes, you want to take all the signatures and line them up and you're ready to sew. So this is optional, but I coat my string in beeswax. I work with a lot of mediums and my journals go through it. So I coat the string in wax. This also keeps it from getting tangled when you're sewing, but again, it's optional. So I melt down some beeswax and once it's liquid, I use my fingers to coat the wax. It gets so hot so fast, so I recommend blowing out the candle at some point, which I did not do. I burned myself, so don't be like me. Also, someone commented on my first video saying Crawford waxed Irish linen thread could be used or a bar of wax, so there are options. Next up is the actual sewing part. I clip my papers together so that I make sure I'm going through the right place. And you're basically just going to do a simple stitch up and down the first signature. When you reach the top, take the next signature, line the holes up, clip it, and go into the next signature and sew down the inside of that one, just like you did the first one. But make sure you loop the thread together with the first signature as you're sewing the outer shells together like this. I usually give it 2 little loops every time I can. You're just going to do the same simple stitch up and down, making sure you loop the spine together. Once you make it to your starting point, tie a knot, grab the third signature, clip it together, and start the same process. And you're basically going to repeat this with all of the signatures that you have. And when you're done, you can go back through and sew the spine together again. I cover the spine with fabric and it's got a cover so no one sees this part. So I kind of just go back and forth making sure everything is sewn together. And once you're sure everything is secure, tie a knot and look at the cool book you have. Make sure it's really secure by getting some glue and some fabric. I use this 3-in-1 glue. I coat both the spine and the fabric and then I press down making sure it coats everything. And brush the glue onto the rest of the paper where the fabric is going. And then use some book clips or some heavy books to keep everything in place and let it dry. Honestly, the hardest part is over. Making the cover is actually really easy. You could probably leave it as is and prime and paint onto this cover because I mean it technically is a book, or you can add some thick paper, but I'm going to show you how to make a fabric hardcover book. The type of fabric is up to you. I have used all sorts of things to make my art journal covers. Some are fabric samples from thrift stores. This one is from a pillowcase, and these are from upholstery fabric, which I think is my favorite, but that can be expensive. The fabric I'm using is actually an old placemat that I've held onto for years. It matches the other journals well, and the size was so perfect I didn't even have to trim it. But depending on what you use, trim it to be a few inches bigger than the book cover. For the cover part, I use the back of sketchbooks, which is basically just chipboard. You could use cardboard, but that will get flimsy over time. And so far, the backs of sketchbooks have worked really well for me. You want to trim the chipboard to be a little bit bigger than your book, And also make sure you cut out a piece for the spine. I usually make the cover spine thicker than the book spine because I put so much into these journals, they expand. So line things up where you want them and get that glue again. Next, you're going to cover one side of the chipboard in glue and place it on your fabric. And with some heavy books or weights, press it down and let the glue dry. The space between the spine and the cover pieces will be the hinge where the book opens and closes. Because my journals expand, I put a lot of space between these parts. So then glue down your other piece and the spine and put some weights on it and let it dry. Once that is all dry, we are going to take the weights off and glue the rest of the fabric down. I'd keep the heavy books close by just in case, but if you have paper clips or clothespins, that would work too. So I just put glue along the edges and I clip it down. There are probably better ways to do the corners, but I just shove in lots of glue, clip it down, and hope for the best. You know, if it's too perfect, I might not want to work in it. And when everything is dry, double check that the corners stayed intact, and they did, and start on the next side. You can also glue down the edges around the spine too. And there you go, the outer cover is done. I like to put a ribbon bookmark in mine, so if you want to add one, this is when I add it. I just use lots of glue. I put it on the ribbon, the spine of the cover, and a little bit on the spine of the book. And then you press it down where you want it to go. You can open up the pages and press in between that way. And then you are going to stack books around it and on top of it. Essentially a mountain of weights, and then you're going to let it dry overnight. Once it's dry, you're going to remove all of the books and get ready for the inside cover. The fabric I'm using for the inside is actually the back of the second placemat since they came in a set. And I'll stash away the top part and maybe use it in a project in another 15 years. So I use a seam ripper and then I trimmed it down to fit where I need it. I'm just using it to cover the chipboard and help further secure the book to the cover. Now, if you have any glue left, it's time to use the rest of it. Cover everything in glue and press down and get those heavy books and clips out again. I did not put any glue on the hinge part because I need that to stay as flexible as possible. I fold the fabric over itself so there's no loose edges showing, and I clip it, put some heavy weights on it, and once it's dry, I start on the next side. And once everything is dry, you are done. Look at the book you made. I noticed that there are some old wax stains and glue marks on the inside cover, so I rummaged through my sewing box, found some gold flowers, and glued them over it. And it's finished. I decorated the inside cover so it feels more concise, but now it's ready to be filled with art. It's such a good way to repurpose almost all of a sketchbook. Just gotta figure out what to do with that spiral part. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope you make one too.